Hi, everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. And for the movie that I want to talk about today, it goes back to 1953. So we're going back a long ways, and we're going to Mexico. And this is Elle, directed by Bunuel, that was released by Criterion a couple weeks ago. I was able to purchase it during the Barnes & Noble Criterion half-price sale. And this movie for me is a wow. I mean, I was just bowled over by this film. I had seen it probably over 50 years ago at a college film society, but I remembered some scenes as they came across, but I had not remembered the impact that this film, I think, has today. It's certainly, I think, one of Bunuel's greatest films, certainly of his Mexican period, and maybe the best film of the movies he made in the 1950s. And it is a story about a wealthy 40-year-old man in Mexico City living in a great mansion, and he is defined as a 40-year-old virgin, and he marries, he instantaneously falls in love with the woman who happens to be a fiance of his best friend. And nothing can stop him. And he is Francisco, the woman he falls in love with, Gloria. She is just overwhelmed by his overwhelming passion for her. And so they do marry. But soon, on the honeymoon, she discovers that there's another side to Francisco, who in the social life is good-looking, popular, very debonair, very charming. But once he gets married, his jealousy the jealous side of his nature gets triggered, which ultimately lead to outright paranoia. And the character Francisco is played by Arturo de Cordoba, and this is him in the grip of his paranoia, and he was one of the most popular Mexican actors of his day. The Mexican film industry was thriving at this time, and he played basically heartthrobs. And then Gloria is played by Delia Garces. This is her, and she is the long-suffering wife. She tries to get help from the church. The priest, who has known Francisco since he was a child, puts all the blame on Gloria. You've got to understand him better. I know he's a good man. Of course, the priest has never seen this dark side. Francisco even convinces with his charm Gloria's mother and Gloria's mother, when she goes for help, says, you have to be more understanding of your husband. So she has nowhere to go. Francisco's paranoia becomes potentially violent, but she starts to pity him. I think that's one of the most interesting parts of the film, is that Gloria starts to pity him. She can't leave him. She knows she should, and she probably can, even in this machismo world that she lived in. Divorce was possible, but she does stick with him until the very end. And there's in the supplements and one of the interviews with Bunuel, he confesses that Francisco is a part of him, that this is I think he said in one of the interviews, this is the closest portrait in his movies to himself. Of course, Bunuel wasn't paranoid to this extreme, but his wife wrote a very telling memoir after he passed away of Bunuel's obsessive jealousy. So this is very this adds another layer of interest. This is a very personal film, in other words, and the look of the film is really great, especially in the mansion, and particularly the staircase. I mean, there's just one of the great staircases in cinema. Certainly Hitchcock loved staircases, Max Ophuls. And the cinematography is by Gabriel Figueroa, who is one of the great cinematographers of all time, and he did make some Hollywood movies. He made The Fugitive with John Ford, The Treasure of Sierra Madre with John Huston. And this has a feel of a film noir. The film, there's many shadows, and like we see shots through windows, and where Francisco becomes progressively seems to be caught in this trap, in this kind of cell of his own psyche. And so there's many terrific scenes here. I'm just going to talk about one very briefly, and that is the bell tower scene in a church. They're sightseeing. They go to a church. They go up a winding staircase and come up to the bell tower where Francisco looks down at the people as if they were ants, and so I just soon crush them. Fools. Why are they happy? Which harkens back to a couple years before with Orson Welles in The Third Man. And then, but it also, right away I was thinking of Vertigo, because he gets kind of violent, her life is in danger. And I believe Hitchcock probably saw this film and incorporated that into his own obsessive villain character in Jimmy Stewart. So Bunuel's career is also really interesting. He started out in Paris. He was part of the avant-garde movement, made a few short films that were noticed by the surrealists, and he was became friends with them, championed by them, including Salvador Dali, especially Salvador Dali. And then with the Spanish Civil War, he comes to New York. He works for MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, but that was short-lived because Dali published an autobiography in which he identified Bunuel as both an atheist and a communist. So Bunuel made his way to Hollywood, and he sort of lived on the fringes of the studio. He was actually working at a Hollywood studio. He didn't believe that there was any path to a successful career for him in Hollywood, which is kind of bizarre, where as far as Elle goes, because Elle looks like a Hollywood film. It looks like a film noir. It's a story of obsessive love. You can imagine Ronald Colman and maybe Joan Fontaine as the two leads. It's the kind of story Hollywood would want to make. Now, Bunuel adds his own touches, and maybe they would have offended the censors or the studio. But he was under constraints too in Mexico. He wasn't identified as a great artist. His previous films in Mexico had not done well. But anyways, in 47, he goes to Mexico, makes a film that I guess of no repute. But then in 1950, he makes a juvenile delinquency film called Los Olvidados, also known as The Young and the Damned. It's still one of the great juvenile delinquency movies of all time, and that got him notoriety. But then he didn't have any. It didn't do well at the box office. It did get some international notice, and then he had to make a bunch of pot boilers until 1953 when he makes Elle, which has turned out. And Elle was brought to Cannes Film Festival. Nobody liked it. Nobody. And in Mexico, they viewed it as a comedy. And really, there is some funny things. You can view Francisco's decline as a tragedy, but it also is comedy. There's a comic dimension to it, which is always in Bunuel's films. It's a tragedy that you can kind of laugh at certain sequences. When Bunuel went to see the film with an audience, there was a certain scene in the film that the audience laughed at about halfway through the film, and then they laughed at the whole film the rest of the way. And then, of course, Bunuel continued on in Mexico, went to Spain. I think he made Viridiana in Spain. And then the final stage of his career was making films in France for the producer Serge Silberman, where he was given pretty much total freedom, do whatever you want, put all your Bunuel touches in the films. They had big successes on the art house scene in the U.S. with Belle de Jour and The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, most notably. So he is a director, I think, that is going to become more and more popular as time goes by, or more and more recognized I mean, he is recognized as one of the great directors, but his films really have a timeless quality to them. So, you know, Elle could be a film, you could film this today. I mean, you could film in any location. I don't think Mexico City is even identified as the city where this action is taking place. So this is a terrific, I watched the 4K. There's no Dolby Vision here, but it just looks absolutely gorgeous. And we get some pretty good supplements. There's no commentary, but there is a video essay, which is just outstanding. If you want to understand Bunuel, understand what he's doing, because he is that kind of director that's, it's worthwhile to study what he was doing, because it will increase one's appreciation of the films. There's a TV discussion, I think it was in Spain, with 4 intellectuals, and it starts a little kind of pretentiously, but they're so lively, they're so enthusiastic about Bunuel's work. I really enjoyed it. There's also an interview with Bunuel, a visual interview, in which he talks to his screenwriter Jean-Claude Carrière, who worked on these later films in Europe, that were filmed in Europe. And Bunuel is very funny and very incisive and very critical of his own work. He didn't like most of his Mexican films, but he does say that Elle is one of the ones that he's the most proudest of. And then we get this booklet. We get, a booklet, not a fold out, and it's full of some really good pictures. Here is Gloria in her mansion with the big doors. The mansion itself really becomes, a character of itself. Francisco first notices Gloria through her shoes at a religious ceremony. This opening sequence is fantastic. Set in a church during some rite where the priests are kissing, are bathing the feet of children and kissing the feet, and then Francisco gets distracted. He's part of the ceremony. He gets distracted. Fine. This is what set Francisco off on his obsessive love for Gloria, so we get a really good essay here. It's from a Spanish historian, film historian, and here are the happy couple, and then we get a pretty good interview with Bunuel by 2 of his collaborators, friends of his, and again he's giving some very entertaining, funny, and again incisive views of his own films and the film world around him. So overall, Elle is a big thumbs up from me. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who listened. I appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.